Hi, I'm Katie Ziskind. I'm the owner of Wisdom Within Counseling and Coaching. I'm a relationship coach, certified sex therapy informed professional, Gottman Level 2 marriage specialist. So this means I help distant couples who are struggling emotionally in cycles of high conflict or avoidance and just feel emotionally like two ships passing in the night, and that is pervasive into your sex life. So you might have low sexual desire, have a disinterest in sex, your partner might be sexually rejecting you, you feel lonely and unwanted in your marriage. So if you're struggling with a cycle of sexual avoidance or sexual withdrawal, or you're feeling emotionally on different planets and you really both want to work together, I would love to support you in relationship coaching. You can work with me at wisdomwithinct.com. So this YouTube episode is actually going to be me recording my podcast live. So you're going to see the behind the scenes, the organic, raw, uncut version of me recording my podcast. I just recorded my podcast intro, so you might hear a few pauses in this YouTube video. You're going to see me, the behind the scenes. You might see my cat jump in the frame. But I really like to be transparent, so you can see the information I'm sharing. You can hear this episode on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts for free. So if you're driving, don't watch the video, just listen. But I like to be really open with my audience. So when we look at emotional intimacy, a lot of times we grow up in family environments where we don't get taught this. So growing up in school, we're taught about math and science, 2 + 2 = 4. We learn subtraction, division, chemistry. We learn about how to get homework in on time, right? We're learning these other skills, and emotional vulnerability and emotional intimacy is a skill that anyone of any age, any nationality, any gender can learn. It's totally a learnable thing, but we have to first understand that growing up, culturally, we don't get support in learning emotional intimacy. If anything, we grow up in family environments and with caregivers that are emotionally neglectful. So the opposite of emotional intimacy is emotional neglect. Emotional neglect is when you have a parent or a caregiver who shamed you for crying, who told you your feelings didn't matter. Even if they didn't say those words to you, your feelings don't matter, their behaviors when you were expressing your feelings caused you to feel dismissed and unsafe to share your feelings in the future. So if you think back to when you were a young child, or even in a current interaction with a parent or caregiver, and you can still have great love and a good relationship with your parent or caregiver, but we have to really look at this from a skill set. So if you think back to a memory of when you were younger and you tried to confide in your parent. Let's say you had something really challenging happen at school and your parent gave you kind of an attitude, like they made it about them, or they started sharing their own anxiety or their own issues. Then you were forced to be a people pleaser. You were forced into a role in that parent-child or parent-caregiver or child-caregiver relationship where you then had to be the caretaker for your parent. This is also really apparent when we have a parent or a caregiver that shows emotional neglect when, that's my cat, when they struggle with an addiction. So this could be a parent that has alcoholism, a gambling issue, a parent who struggles with drug addiction, or even sometimes parents struggle with affairs and cheating and like sex addiction behaviors. As well, sometimes we have a parent who's emotionally neglectful or emotionally invalidating and dismissive because of their own mental health issues. So, a lot of times this stuff isn't talked about until we're in adulthood. So having a parent with obsessive compulsive disorder, a parent with bipolar disorder, a parent who has borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder is unable to step into your emotional needs, your emotional world, and often will shame you. As well, if you have a parent who has anger issues, like they are completely blocked and limited in their ability to support you in your emotional needs. So when we look at how we need to build emotional intimacy, part of this is recognizing that we don't get taught how to be vulnerable humans because we often have to go into survival mode and stuff feelings away in young childhood years. So inherently there's this belief that my feelings shouldn't be shared. No one cares about my feelings. If I do share them, I'm gonna be punished. Like if you cried when you were a child, you might have been told to go to your room and only show your face when you were happy and presentable, right? And that is damaging, right? So I just want to validate you if that was your experience in childhood. As well, if you weren't allowed to cry, that means that your parent only allowed you to show a sliver of your authentic self. So part of being emotionally vulnerable in your marriage is showing your full self, your authentic self, saying, hey, I want to build intimacy. That's into me, you see, is intimacy. Into me, you see. And that means showing your authentic self and having your authentic self be welcomed in the marriage. But growing up, you were only allowed to show the happy side, the straight A side, or the perfectionist side, or that you were loved when you were in that people-pleasing mode, or you were given love by your parents or caregivers when you were caretaking for them. And that was the only time when your parent was receptive to you or was calm. And the other times they were highly anxious, explosive and angry, emotionally neglectful, dismissive of your experience. So just know that a lot of times we don't learn these skills growing up when we are young. And there's no one really, when you think about it, you don't really have a person that you think of when you were a child that was like, hey, this is an emotion. I accept your emotions. This is how you accept your own emotions, and that what that does is it builds trust. It builds a strong, healthy, secure sense of self. Most often we have parents, role models, family members, adults, caregivers in our lives that are telling us to keep secrets, that are saying, oh, don't tell your other parent this. And they're saying, maybe you had a parent that told you they were having an affair and told you to keep that a secret from your other parent. Or, there's so much often secret keeping. Secret keeping perpetuates dysfunction. But a lot of times we learn really negative patterns of communication from our families. And this is the opposite of emotional vulnerability and emotional intimacy. So if you had a parent who was an alcoholic, a parent with mental health issues, a parent that just was emotionally neglectful, that creates a challenge already. But recognizing that, being aware of that, being non-judgmental towards yourself is really important. It's so funny, my cat's over here. I just paused the podcast for a minute, but you see her over here. It's so cute. She's on the chair. Okay, so I'm going to resume the podcast. So when it comes to looking at emotional intimacy, this might be a new word that you're learning to understand, right? So when we're young, we learn that there is an apple in the grocery store, and we learn that what bananas look like. And we learn the difference between a banana and an orange. And we have to learn that, right? So we're going to start to learn the difference between creating emotional safety, the slight difference between offering comfort and reassurance, the exact timing of when it would be supportive to validate your partner, what emotional validation even looks like and means, right? So a lot of times we don't learn these things partly too because we're cultured in very traditional gender roles. So for instance, we have a traditional female or cisgender female or a vulva owner from a young age is taught to be a caregiver. Put your emotions on the back burner. Don't be too much. Don't be too sensitive. Don't be too opinionated. Don't rock the boat, right? Women in particular are told to play small, cater to everyone in her life, and this puts so much pressure on females. Females, 50 years ago weren't allowed to have a bank account. They had to be married to a man to have a bank account. Females also weren't allowed to have credit cards in their own name. They had to be married, and the man was the one that carried all of the money and handled all the finances. So there was an imbalance of power and control in these relationships. Women were not allowed to own property. They were not allowed to buy a house. They had to be married, and then the man was put on the deed of the house. So looking back 50 years, we've come really far in terms of feminism and independence, but a lot of these traditional gender stereotypes are still ingrained because these were the people raising us, parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles. And so a lot of times women right now, we're working on having a voice, being assertive, saying, hey, I have this uncomfortable emotion and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share with you that I'm not feeling okay. And then that offers an opportunity for emotional validation, right? Because a lot of times women were taught by the women raising them not to speak up, not to talk, not to say they were sad, not to be sad, just be happy, just look good, be the doll, be the porcelain doll, have the rosy cheeks, make sure your lipstick's in order, put the mascara on. And there's so much pressure to maintain that perfect mask. And what we want to do here to promote emotional vulnerability is take the mask off. We have to remove that false facade, that mask of perfectionism, and instead shift into authenticity. So authenticity is true self-security and self-esteem. And there is an exchange of emotional intimacy that occurs in a really healthy marriage. So we have to push back on some of these gender roles. Another piece is that many men, penis owners, boys were traditionally gendered or fell into attitudes or were cultured to be the breadwinner. So a lot of men grow up with this messaging that all I have to do to be a good partner, or the one thing I need to do to be a good husband, is to make money. So if I bring home the bacon, if I make good money, if I have a good job, then I am being a successful husband. And there is so much more to it, but we're not taught that. We're not taught, hey, husbands also need to be sensitive, emotionally in tune, show emotional vulnerability, talk about feelings, offer touch, understand foreplay, right? There's like so much to it. But traditionally, men are also gendered to not really understand their own emotional world, or are told if you cry, you're a baby. If you think about like, let's say a young boy is playing baseball and they get hit in the face with the baseball and it's like really stings their lip and their lip is bleeding and they're crying. That young boy walks over to a parent who is very male gendered, very emotionally neglectful, and that parent then says, suck it up, you're not hurt, go get back in the game. That young boy develops a narrative of pushing his emotions away, stuffing his feelings away, does not gain self-awareness, does not feel trust in the caregivers around him. There's no emotional safety. And so there's this big wall, a brick wall that develops. And so young boys are often groomed to push away emotions, which leads to marital challenges when it comes to displaying emotional vulnerability. So we have to look at sometimes how we're treating young boys. A lot of times too, young boys are given trucks and very gendered to have toolkits and very male-oriented toys. But studies have shown, evidence-based research has shown that when young boys are given baby dolls, those young boys are much more emotionally attuned because they get to play out and pretend play how to be caring towards a baby doll. So they're more able to nurture younger siblings, they're more able to be empathetic. So it is very helpful to give young boys baby doll toys in order to support that emotional connection later on in adulthood relationships. So I just want to talk a little bit about how gender and culture influences the lack of emotional intimacy and these challenges around emotional connection in your marriage. Now, when we're looking at building emotional intimacy, this is into me, you see. You're letting someone in. It's risky. It's a little bit scary sometimes. And we also want to understand the process of self-compassion. So be gentle with yourself. Be really compassionate with yourself. When you've had a parent or a caregiver in your younger years that was emotionally neglectful, it can be really scary. You felt invisible growing up. You felt cast aside. You felt ignored. Your emotions were unimportant to the adults in your life. So it's very, very important to offer yourself compassion and gentleness. This means even imagining your inner child, finding a photo of yourself from when you were younger, and genuinely talking to your inner child and saying, I'm here to love you. I'm not going anywhere. There's nothing that you could say that would push me away. Right? So you're starting to become the adult that source of security that you never had growing up to yourself. So imagine your inner child, maybe the clothes you were wearing, look at that photo and talk very positively, compassionately, and gently to your inner child. You know, if your inner child felt disconnected and distant from the adults in their life, you could say, you know, I'm always going to be here anytime you need to connect. Nurturing your inner child fosters a more secure and strong and emotionally vulnerable relationship with yourself. And from there, you can extend that to your romantic partner or partners. So doing inner child work is very helpful. A lot of times the wounds that we have, the inability to be empathetic, and the pain that we get into when it comes to conflicts with a partner are related to inner child wounds. These are wounding experiences. It's painful to be a child and have a parent tell you to suck it up when you want a hug. It's painful to be a child and have a parent that is struggling with their own alcoholism that just screams in your face because you did one minor thing incorrectly. It is painful as a child to get 95% on a test and be excited and want praise and come home and have a parent tell you that you didn't meet their expectations and you're still not good enough in their eyes. It's incredibly painful as a child to confide in a parent or a caregiver about some deep challenges that you're going through and have that parent make it about themselves and be selfish and even withhold love and that find that that love is unconditional. It's very challenging to find out that your parent has been keeping secrets or having an affair, right? So all of these things are impacting the ability for emotional connection and emotional intimacy in your current day adulthood marriage. Now, when it comes to building emotional intimacy, a big step is to talk about what your partner feels. It can help to use a feeling wheel because a lot of times we don't even know what we're feeling, right? We have to be able to talk about these emotions and have, you know, ways to name them. And so, like, when we look at talking about emotions, right? It might be new or uncomfortable at first, but I'm just going to give you an example of this morning, right? We're always going through emotional experiences, but we oftentimes shut that off and we're just very fact-based in our culture. So I want you to almost like emphasize your emotions. So think about your day. I want you to name like 5 or 10 different emotions that you had during the day. And I'm going to just give you some examples that are playful and silly, just so you can get the idea. But I want you to then engage with your partner in a conversation regarding their feelings and understand their emotions. So let's say, you know, I woke up this morning and I was feeling, right, first feeling word would be relaxed. I was laying in bed and I saw my pets around me. I felt relaxed, right? That even may have felt blissful. I felt really cared for by my pets, and then I extended care by petting them. There was a sense of peacefulness. I felt peaceful in the morning, waking up that way, right? Sometimes children wake up dreading school. Dread is a very intense emotion. Sometimes people wake up really scared after having a bad dream, right? There can be just sometimes we wake up and we have body pain and we're disappointed our back hurts, right? Like there can be so many emotions with waking up. And so we have to just know that all these emotions are totally okay and we're just accepting what we feel. So then, you know, I brush my teeth and I'm feeling a sense of love for myself in this self-care practice. I'm excited about making breakfast. You know, I am really, you know, just enjoying that experience. So all these different emotions are part of our day. And so, you know, for another person, if they're going to a job that they don't like I love my job, I love working with my clients, but so I'm pretty enthusiastic. I felt really excited and optimistic about my day. I felt happy about my day. But if you have a job that you don't like, you might feel dissatisfied. You might even feel a sense of panic. You might feel, you know, envious or jealous of other people that have a different job that they enjoy. You might feel really frustrated with your boss. You might have even, you know, been hurt by people at work that were talking down to you or belittling you, right? You might feel anxious about having to see them, right? There's just so many emotions that can come up. Let's just say it's midday, and like the other day I went out and planted some lily bulbs. So I felt actually it was very hard because I had to move a lot of dirt. So at one point I was feeling exasperated. I was feeling exhausted. I was feeling really tired, and I sat down, I took a little break and listened to the birds, and I tried to figure out how I was going to move all this dirt. And then I looked up at the sky and I felt really inspired because I was like, wow, like there's some trees moving, like the very tips of the trees. It was a really beautiful day. The blue sky was up there and the birds were calming me down, right? So I was able to calm myself down. And then once I finally got the lily bulbs and liatris and tiger lilies and gladiolas, all these bulbs, flower bulbs planted, and all this dirt moved back into the hole and mulch on top, I felt so satisfied. And I felt relieved. All the dirt was moved. I felt really, excited and satisfied to see these bloom in a couple months. So just in one small experience, we can have a range of emotions. As well, right? If we take a really painful relationship betrayal, like let's say cheating or infidelity or an affair of some kind, the person who cheated often experiences excitement in the moment, but immense shame and guilt and regret after the moment, right? So like a child stealing a cookie from the cookie jar, they're excited in the moment, but once they realize that they weren't supposed to do that, and I'm not minimizing affairs in any way, but it's the same thing. There is sadness, disappointment, shame, despair, grief, guilt, regret, right? They're displeased with themselves. There's a feeling of depression, right? So a lot of times we have so many different emotions, and I want you to get really comfortable understanding the feeling wheel and the emotional wheel, so that instead of just reacting or doing a behavior, you can actually more clearly and more effectively articulate within yourself and to all the people in your life, your child, your parents, your siblings, your partner, your friends, your boss, what you're feeling. Because when you use a feeling word, it's a universal language, right? Someone can say, wow, I feel really helpless. Wow, okay, I don't want you to feel helpless. What's causing you to feel helpless? I'm really curious. Or, I'm feeling really proud of you. Wow, okay, there's this shared experience. So I want you and your partner to really understand, take a look at the feeling wheel, really start to understand your own emotional experience. This might be new if you've never talked about emotions. You've just been in an executive mode. You've been in a fact-based mode. You've been in a behavior-oriented mode, right? But stepping into the feeling world slows the communication down, and it makes it more effective, detailed, and allows you to be receptive as well to other people's feelings. So by identifying your own emotions, you can better communicate them with others. You can support others in feeling emotionally connected with you, and you can also more clearly articulate your world. So saying I feel bad, or I just need to do this thing to fix this other thing, right? That's like a very rushed state of mind. We want to say I feel this, right? If you are like struggling with alcoholism and you've gone back to drinking alcohol, like what is the feeling beneath that behavior, right? You might feel shame and you might feel guilty from drinking alcohol. There might be like a lot of that self-criticism, but like what is the feeling? Is it a feeling of inadequacy? Is it a feeling of, panic? Is it a feeling of anxiety, right? And then you feel like you need the alcohol to lessen those feelings or numb them out. So, and then we want to find healthy, positive coping tools for releasing those emotions in a more effective and self-loving manner. So that could be through a gentle yoga class, it could be through meditation, going for a walk, taking a shower, journaling, right? So rather than running from the emotion or numbing out the emotion, you can identify it and you can accept it, and then it just moves on. So another piece when it comes to emotional intimacy in your marriage is to communicate about emotions regularly. A lot of times couples fall into telling each other what to do, right? Telling each other how to act, how to behave, what they should be doing better, what they're doing wrong. And this creates a cycle of conflict and emotional disconnection. So when it comes to emotional intimacy, I want you to focus on communicating your emotional experience. So this means saying, I feel, not you need to do this better, or you're making me feel criticized, right? I feel hurt. I feel excited. I feel playful. I feel aroused. I feel safe when, right? I statements are you taking ownership, you identifying your emotional experience, and then sharing that, and that builds emotional intimacy. Talk about your emotions and then listen to your partner's emotions, right? Even if you might not agree, you don't have to fix your partner's emotions. You have to trust that your partner has enough self-care tools to sit with those feelings, and by them telling you is actually a really good sign. It means that you're a safe person. When your partner tells you, hey, I'm feeling upset with this, or I'm feeling rejected or alone in our marriage, that's a really good sign that your partner's coming to you and talking to you. So emotional intimacy is a willingness of both of you to want to sustain a long-term romantic relationship. It's impossible to sustain a long-term marriage without emotional intimacy. It's very surface level. It creates marital cracks. It creates infidelity. People cheat. We crave on a deep core level emotional intimacy. And it's often because we didn't get it growing up. So when you don't have emotional intimacy or emotional vulnerability in your marriage, it doesn't feel safe, doesn't feel like you can go to your partner. You feel unwanted, feel undesired, you might even feel unattractive, you feel lack of support, there's a sense of emotional disconnection, you're two ships passing in the night, right? Your sex life falls to the back burner, your sex life becomes non-existent, right? In order for romance, we need safety, we need playfulness, and emotional intimacy is a really important piece when it comes to creating that safety. So think of like cycles of avoidance or cycles of disconnection or sexual avoidance, emotional avoidance as really symptoms and signs that you need to improve your emotional intimacy skills in your marriage, which is what I specialize in helping couples do. So you guys can work with me in relationship coaching sessions to learn how to communicate more openly, to express appreciation, to really talk about what you admire about your partner, to tell your partner what they do that matters to you, why they matter to you, to foster that reassurance. And all of this creates emotional safety. We talk about how to exchange emotions, how to talk about these things. Learning about how your partner feels is a form of emotional intimacy. And when there is a lack of emotional intimacy, it is a predictor of divorce, it's a predictor of separation, predictor of affairs, cheating, predictors of alcoholism, predictors of any sort of numbing, disconnecting behavior, right? So emotional disconnection, being ignored as a child, cast aside, unwanted, feeling unimportant, feeling dismissed emotionally as a child is so painful. And then when a significant other or spouse does that same thing, that feeling of being unwanted, disconnected, cast aside, dismissed, and frustrated all comes up again, and it's 1,000 times more painful with someone you're married to. So when we look at connection, it's verbalizing intimacy. It's setting aside quality time together to talk about emotional experiences and to make all the feelings your partner has welcome. If your partner starts crying, that is a beautiful gift. It means your partner feels safe with you. Give your partner a hug. Connect with your partner. Rub their back. Take their hand. Pull them in physically and show your partner that you respect them being their authentic self. If your partner's crying, don't make fun of them for crying. Don't tell them to stuff their emotions away like your emotionally neglectful parents or caregivers told you. Shift into being that safe person. Connect with your partner who's crying by letting them know you understand them. Let your partner know, hey, it's totally safe to cry in front of me. I'm so glad you're sharing these emotions with me. It's really important because a lot of times when I'm working with couples, one person cries and the other person just freezes up. If your partner cries, you might not know how to create that connection. You might not know how to step into emotional intimacy. So I can show you exactly how to do that and give you a guidebook. So emotional intimacy and emotional vulnerability are important building blocks when it comes to building a healthy sex life. In order to be sexually intimate and have an amazing sex life, we need emotional vulnerability. It allows for a safe playground for sexual connection. So when emotional needs are met, when we're listening to each other, when we're elevating each other, we're not talking down to each other, we're not criticizing each other, we're not belittling each other, we're actually elevating each other. We're curious about each other's emotional experience. You're allowing your partner to get to know more about your emotional world. You are thoughtful when you're communicating your feelings. You are both showing a commitment and interest in each other. These are all important ways to meet each other's emotional needs. Talk about your childhoods. Talk about those memories of when you felt ignored, dismissed, invalidated by those caregivers in your life and how that affects your marriage now. Make that a normal conversation, part of being at the kitchen table together. And talk about those core needs. What helps you feel comforted? What helps you feel reassured? What helps you feel connected? We all have different things that help us feel connected, right? So talking about feelings is one of them. Holding hands could be another. Cuddling together every day for 20 minutes before bed. Really just talk about what that looks like for both of you. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast today on emotional intimacy and emotional vulnerability. This is about deeply connecting on a core level. And it is something that we are not often taught. So if you and your partner are struggling with cycles of avoidance, conflict, sexual disconnection, loneliness, feeling unwanted, I would love to support you in rebuilding, even if it's for the first time, building emotional intimacy and sexual intimacy skills. A lot of times when we're stuck in a cycle of sexual avoidance and sexual disconnection, emotional intimacy and emotional expression tools need to be built. As well, if there has been affairs, infidelity, lying, and cheating, emotional intimacy needs to be rebuilt. So if you need help building emotional intimacy and sexual connection, I would love to support you and your partner. You can work with me at wisdomwithinct.com. I'm Katie Ziskind. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in multiple states, certified sex therapy informed professional. So I specialize in sex and intimacy issues with couples. I'm also a Gottman Level 2 marriage therapist. And I would love to support you in building emotional expression, emotional connection, as well as sexual passion and rebuild sexual desire. That's wisdomwithinct.com.